Okay. Have you ever, like, felt kind of weird when somebody copies you? Like, you have an idea and then somebody in a meeting says it like it was their idea.
Right.
Or like, I don't know, you buy a cool new outfit and then somebody shows up wearing the same thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
That's
so weird.
Feeling for sure.
Yeah, and we have some sources today that we're going to do a deep dive into.
Yeah.
That explore kind of the psychology behind why that is. Why we have that reaction like, oh, that's so weird.
Yeah, it's fascinating how just like that simple act can trigger such like complex emotions in us.
Right.
We often kind of jump to conclusions, assuming the worst, when in reality there could be like a whole spectrum of reasons behind somebody's actions.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
One of the first things our sources jump into is this idea of like social comparison.
Oh, totally.
Which, we all do.
We all do.
Right. We're all sizing ourselves up against each other.
Yeah. Checking out, their clothes, their accomplishments.
Yeah.
Their Instagram feed.
Instagram. Exactly.
It's a natural human instinct.
Yeah.
It's deeply rooted in our need for social standing.
Yeah.
We want to feel valued and unique within our social groups.
Exactly.
And being copied can feel like a threat to that.
Like almost like you're losing your specialness.
Right, exactly.
Like you're not the only one anymore.
It's like someone is trying to claim ownership of something that we perceive as uniquely ours.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the thing.
Right.
It's about like what it means.
Right. It's about our perceived position within a social hierarchy.
Right.
For example, imagine like you're the first in your friend group to get a certain type of piercing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And, it feels unique and edgy, a symbol of like your individuality.
Yeah.
That then another friend gets the same piercing. Yeah. Suddenly it doesn't feel as special anymore. It can even feel like your individuality is being diminished.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That was mine.
Right. Exactly.
That was my territory.
It's like encroaching on your social territory.
Yes. It's almost instinctual, this need to like stand out.
It is,
Have our own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this leads into another interesting concept that the sources highlight, which is attribution bias.
Attribution bias, yeah.
It's explain that one.
Okay, so attribution bias,
yeah,
it's essentially like a mental shortcut. Okay.
Our brain takes to explain other people's behavior.
Okay.
We tend to attribute their actions to their personality or intentions.
Okay.
Especially when those actions affect us negatively.
Okay, so like for example, say, you have this idea for a project.
Right.
And then a classmate kind of like, it takes it, but doesn't really give you credit.
Yeah.
And then our brain goes, oh, they're trying to steal my thunder.
Exactly.
Instead of maybe they were just inspired by me.
Right.
And they just got,
got caught up in the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Our brains jump to the conclusion that they're being malicious or trying to one-up us when there might be a more innocent explanation.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, our brains are almost wired to, like,
I think so.
protect our egos, even if it means we're, like, misinterpreting the situation.
I think that's a good way to put it,
And that goes back to that social comparison, too, right?
I think it ties back in.
Like, I'm feeling threatened, so I'm assuming the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a self-preservation mechanism, really.
Yeah.
And while it may have served us well, back in the day.
Yeah, in caveman time.
Right. In today's complex social world.
It can really
lead
to unnecessary conflict, misunderstandings.
Okay, so how do we avoid this attribution bias trap?
Right.
Especially when, and our sources point this out too, that so much of communication is nonverbal.
So much of it,
So we can't always know what people are really thinking.
Right.
Or what their intent is.
Read minds, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it's particularly relevant, in our digital age.
Right. So much is text.
So much communication is text-based, devoid of those crucial nonverbal cues.
So like, say someone, I don't know, reposts your joke or something. You're like, wait, are they making fun of me?
Yeah.
Or are they like, that's a funny joke?
It's hard to tell without that nonverbal communication.
And this is where the sources offer this like really practical tip, which is when in doubt.
Yeah. Ask for clarification.
Yeah. Yeah. It can save a lot of unnecessary stress.
Yeah.
Potential conflict.
So much easier.
I'll ask.
To just say, hey, I noticed you said that.
Yeah.
Like, what did you mean?
What did you mean by that?
By that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It opens the door for dialogue, understanding, and it shows the other person that you're willing to communicate openly, respectfully. Even if
I'm feeling a little...
You're feeling a bit sensitive
about it.
Yeah. About being copied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's such good advice.
It's easier said than done sometimes, though.
I know, but I think it's so important.
Oh, for sure.
To remember.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so easy to just get caught up in your own head.
It is.
When you feel like, oh, they're copying me.
Right.
But asking can really...
It can.
Yeah, change the whole thing.
Totally change the dynamic.
But there's another kind of layer to this whole copying thing that I find super interesting.
Yeah.
Which is this, our sources talk about this need for recognition and desire to be unique.
Absolutely.
Right. It's like you want to feel like
we all have this,
seen and appreciated.
Innate desire.
For your contribution.
To express ourselves authentically.
And when somebody copies you, it's almost like...
To feel like, they're saying...
Ideas and perspectives.
Like, your idea wasn't special enough.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take it.
Right.
And make it mine.
When someone copies us, it can feel like...
And that's so they're undermining our originality.
Yeah.
Like, they're trying to steal our spotlight.
Right. It's like, hey, I was rocking this look first.
Right. Exactly.
Or I,
And that can be...
I spent weeks crafting that argument. And you're just going to parrot it back to me.
Especially if you've put a lot of time and effort into developing your own unique style.
Right. Exactly.
Voice approach.
It's so hard.
Yeah. And it can be especially challenging.
Yeah.
In
creative fields.
Creative fields where it's all...
Originality is so highly...
so it's like this...
the value.
It's like this age-old wanting to be original.
Dilemma.
But also knowing that...
How do you...
We all,
stand out from
the crowd on other people's ideas.
While still being...
The sources talk about this.
Inspired by others.
And how do we reconcile that?
Right. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think the key lies in understanding that true originality doesn't necessarily mean creating something entirely new from scratch.
Okay.
It's more about taking inspiration.
Okay, so like taking those influences and then putting your own spin on it.
Anything that sparks your imagination, filtering it through your own unique lens.
Okay, so like transforming it into your own thing.
It's about transforming that inspiration.
Yeah. Because I always think about like...
Think to something distinctly...
The most,
your own...
Like amazing artists.
Think about it.
Musicians. Writers.
Most groundbreaking.
Like they were all inspired by the people who came before.
Writers. Right? They were influenced.
Yeah.
By those who came before them.
So it's like that whole saying...
They took those influences, those building blocks.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
And molded them.
Which sometimes in the moment, it doesn't feel very flattering.
Into something fresh and innovative.
But maybe there's some truth to that.
Right.
There
definitely can be.
Yeah.
Sometimes being copied.
Because it means like...
Can be a sign.
You're doing something right.
That you're on the right track.
Yeah.
That your work is resonating.
They're noticing.
With others. That you're inspiring them.
Right.
In some way.
But obviously,
Of course.
There are times when it crosses the line.
There are always those instances.
Especially in a professional setting.
Copying crosses the line.
It's about your intellectual property.
Especially in professional settings.
Right, like if somebody...
When intellectual property...
Straight up plagiarizes.
Is involved.
Yeah.
Right?
Steals your designs or whatever.
Like if someone straight up plagiarizes your work.
Yeah.
Or steals your design.
That's obviously unethical.
That's a whole other level.
Right.
Unethical.
But what about,
behavior.
Those situations where it's kind of blurrier.
Well, what about those more subtle situations?
Like, say, a coworker who...
is constantly
borrowing your ideas.
Maybe a coworker.
Or a friend who's always like...
consistently borrows your ideas.
Mirroring your style.
Or a friend who always seems to be mirroring...
Like, what do you do?
Your style choices.
in those
situations can be tricky. And that's where the sources emphasize the importance of communication.
So like, just talk to the person.
And setting boundaries.
Yeah.
If you're feeling uncomfortable or taken advantage of, it's crucial.
Instead of letting those feelings just like...
To speak up.
Stir.
And express your feelings.
Yeah. Have an open conversation.
Approach them.
With the person.
With a calm and respectful demeanor.
Yeah.
Explain how their actions
so they might not even
are making you feel.
And see if you can work together.
Yeah, they're coming across that way.
A solution.
Right. So it's really about advocating for yourself.
Advocating for yourself.
But also like being open to your creative space.
Their perspective, too.
And also being open to hearing the other person's
They might not even know
perspective.
that they're, you know...
They might not even realize
doing that
their actions are coming across.
Yeah, exactly. As copying.
Yeah.
So you can almost turn it into...
Sometimes people copy unintentionally, perhaps, because they admire you or simply haven't developed their own...
Like they just don't have their own style yet. Yeah. And you can kind of help them with that.
By having that open dialogue, you can help them understand.
And it all comes back to communication.
The importance of originality and encourage them.
So like just bringing it back to our listener.
To develop their own unique
voice.
You know, it sounds like just understanding that these like underlying reasons for why copying might bug us can help us. I'm not just react
for sure,
you know, emotionally to it.
Right.
So like what
it can help us respond.
Some takeaways in a more constructive way
that our listener
can
maybe use in their own lives.
Just feeling threatened.
When they feel copied.
Or annoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think recognizing that social comparison is a natural human tendency.
Is a good place to start.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to like...
It's important to be yourself.
Become aware
about it.
Of those moments when you're comparing
just notice
yourself to others.
Yeah.
And try to reframe those thoughts.
And then,
in a more positive light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
and building on that.
Remember that.
Remember that attribution bias.
Attribution bias.
Can really... cloud our judgment.
Mess us up.
So the next time you feel copied.
Try to pause before jumping.
Take a deep breath and say, okay, consider alternative explanations.
What's really going on here?
And if you're unsure, don't be afraid.
Am I overreacting?
To ask for clarification,
it's
like taking a deep breath.
Is there another way?
And saying, okay.
To look at this.
What's really going on here?
Yeah.
Am I overreacting?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there another way to interpret?
And then if it's appropriate,
this situation.
Have that conversation with the person.
Exactly. And then maybe they don't even have that open and honest conversation with the person. You might be surprised.
You know, how much clarity and understanding.
Even if they are like.
Can come from simply talking it through.
Trying to copy you.
Right.
It can still be a positive.
I think it's also important to remember that being copied.
Because it can just like.
Can sometimes be a form of flattery. Yeah.
Even if it
set some boundaries.
Doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
At first, it can be a sign that your work...
So instead of like getting all defensive or others that you're inspiring...
Accusatory.
In some way.
You can just say, hey, I've noticed that you've been doing this lately. Well, I'm curious.
Isn't intended as flattery.
What inspired you?
It could still be an opportunity.
Consider.
It can challenge you.
Absolutely.
Something
it's having considered.
Innovate. Right. To find new and even more compelling ways.
But even if they're not.
To express
your need to copy you. They might be like.
So instead of feeling threatened.
I just really admire.
We can use it as fuel.
What you're doing.
To level up. Our own game.
You know, right.
It's that open dialogue that can...
Exactly. Embrace the challenge and let it inspire you
to reach, moving forward.
Even greater
creative.
Right.
Yeah, it really shifts your perspective.
It does.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you realize like...
I think it's worth highlighting one final point from the research, which ties back to that desire for uniqueness that we were discussing earlier.
Okay, all ears.
It's the idea that like true originality often comes from like embracing inspiration rather than like fearing it.
So not being afraid to look to others for inspiration.
Yeah, it's about like...
But then kind of copy your own.
Right. We all draw inspiration somewhere.
Okay, so we talked about, the psychology of copying.
Yeah.
But like, how do we actually deal with those like icky feelings when it happens?
How do we deal with those icky feelings?
Yeah, like what are some
tips?
Really practical tip that our sources offer.
Okay.
Is to like focus on your own work.
Okay.
And
instead of getting caught up in...
let your talent speak for itself.
Like the comparison.
Right. It's about like...
go like...
channeling that energy...
own stuff.
...into something productive.
Yeah.
And fulfilling...
your energy into...
instead of like...
making your own work awesome.
dwelling on what others are doing.
And not worry about...
because what other people are doing.
Brings you joy.
Right.
What makes you feel alive.
Yeah, it's so easy to get like...
and let that passion...
distracted by what other people are doing.
In your work.
But ultimately, it's about you and your work.
True originality comes from authenticity.
Yeah, and I think...
it's about being true to yourself.
That's real...
to your unique voice.
Empowering.
Into your own creative...
to just be like...
I'm going to do my thing.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
And if people copy me...
to take risks.
That's fine.
And to let your individuality...
it's more about me.
shine through.
And everything you do.
My work is speaking for itself.
And in those moments when you do feel copied.
Exactly.
Remember that it's not.
It's like, I'm not going to let...
the actions of others.
of your worth define mine.
Creative path.
It's simply a reflection of the other person's...
it's just about me.
choices.
And perhaps their own...
I'm going to make my stuff awesome.
insecurities you can choose to...
because that's what matters.
rise above those petty dynamics.
Like, who cares?
And focus on what truly matters. Other people...
your own creative expression. Copying me.
Yeah.
The joy
it brings you.
What matters?
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole conversation...
I think that's a
has been so eye-opening.
really important point.
I feel like
that's what
I have a whole new toolkit now.
deep dive is all about.
For dealing with this.
It's
Instead of just feeling...
giving you the insights.
like threatened or annoyed.
And tools.
To navigate...
those tricky interpersonal situations.
consider the context.
With more awareness.
Maybe even use it as inspiration.
Confidence.
And grace.
To level up my own game.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up,
Yeah.
let's leave our listener
So to wrap things up,
with some final thoughts.
let's leave our listener
When those feelings creep up
with a few final thoughts.
of I'm being copied.
What are some key takeaways?
When those feelings creep up
you should remember.
of I'm being copied.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways?
Okay.
To remember.
Yeah.
First, remember, social comparison is normal, but don't let it consume
Right.
and consider
Take a deep breath.
alternative explanations for the other person's behavior.
And don't be afraid to communicate.
And don't be afraid to communicate. If
You
something feels off,
Like, if something feels weird,
address it directly
right,
and respectfully.
talk about it.
You might be surprised
You know,
by the positive outcome.
and like, you might be surprised at the result.
Most importantly, focus on your own journey.
Yeah.
Embrace inspiration.
Focus on your stuff.
Express your unique talents.
What makes you happy?
And let your authenticity shine through. You got this.
Yeah, you got this then.
Yeah.
Well, that about wraps up our
That wraps up our
deep dive
into the psychology
of copying.
Hopefully you're walking away
With a fresh perspective.
with a fresh perspective.
Maybe even a little more self-assurance.
a little more
Until next time.
self-assurance.
Oh, like
Till
to.
next time.
This is DigitView.